Hello everyone and welcome to our Talking Retail webinar. My name is Kat Matthews. I'm the Digital Marketing Manager here at Arktic Fox and I will be today's host. So this is a short 30 to 40-minute session designed to allow us to share with you some of the key themes and outtakes on digital and e-commerce in retail from Teresa's time in the US. So Teresa attended the National Retail Federation's Retail's Big Show, which brings together more than 6,000 brands and 40,000 visitors from around the globe to New York City for 3 days of learning, collaboration, and discovery. So a little bit about Teresa before I hand over to her. She's been in the digital and e-com space for over 20 years, working across consumer brands and retail, amongst other industries over her career. She led data, personalization, and digital at Officeworks, and also spent time at Kohl's managing loyalty, data, and e-commerce before moving across to establish Arktic Fox as a strategy, training, and thought leadership provider for the industry. So in today's session, Teresa will spend 15 minutes covering off some of the biggest trends and takeaways from her recent time in the US, and then we'll finish up with some Q&A before wrapping up the session. So as Teresa shares the insights, please feel free to pop any questions you have into the chat, and we will cover some of these off at the end of the session. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Teresa.
Thank you, Kat, and welcome everyone. I'm really excited to be able to be here today to share with you some of the many insights from my trip to the US, and I do see some very familiar faces online, so it's great to see you all here with us today. I may have some internet issues. We will see how we go. That is the one challenge that we all face working from home, but hopefully we shouldn't get too many interruptions. Before we get started, for those of you who may not know much about Arktic Fox, we are pleased to be able to work with some of the biggest and best consumer and retail brands in the country, partnering in areas of digital, e-commerce, data, from strategy creation through to capability build and strategy realization, as well as training. For those who want to know a little bit more about us, please check out our website or drop me a line post today's briefing. So that's it for the plug. Let's get right into it. So just for a bit of context before I dive into the key themes that I will share, I want to provide a little bit of an overview of how we've pulled this together. So whilst I was on a month-long family holiday, not only did I get the opportunity to visit NRF, I also toured about a dozen retail stores across grocery, footwear and apparel, and health. And so they were the likes of Walgreens, Publix, Dick's Sporting Goods, Target, and many more. And so the insights that I'll share today is really a blend of what I saw and what I heard during my time in the States. And so my plan is to cover off 6 key themes and takeaways, some of which are more relevant to retailers, some of which are more relevant for consumer brands, and some of which are relevant for both, because I know we have people here today from both sides of the equation. And then, as Kat mentioned, I'll answer any questions that you may have. So that's the context. So just starting off with the first trend, which I am terming human-led, powered by digital. What was most interesting about my time in stores and at NRF was seeing the role digital is really playing to aid the sales associate to add value to the customer experience and better perform their role without necessarily looking to reduce human interaction from the retail experience itself. Digital and tech are being deployed in a number of ways to enhance the sales associate's experience and really better equip them to serve the customer, something which I think we are not necessarily thinking enough about as retailers in this market today. And this is presenting in several forms. So the first is really tools and tech that help the sales associate to better serve the customer and identify customer needs in the moment to make recommendations that are really powered by data in stores. The second is really tools and tech that really supports task delivery and productivity. So think reminders to restock an item on a shelf or helping sales team members to locate products in store for a customer and more. And I've got some really great examples of some great innovation in terms of what's happening in that space. And then finally, greater access to customer information to empower store and team members to engage in a more personalised and relevant way. So what does this look like in practice? Brands like Sephora have really created a host of tools in this space, including their signature skin analyzer. This tool enables beauty advisors to analyze a customer's skin in the store as part of a live consultation to determine the right products for the customer based on tone of skin, skin type, etc., etc. The associate then combines this with the information they glean from the consultation through discussion to recommend the right products. And this tool is powered by data. So Sephora leverages insights from their 40 million members to power that tool. And it's a really great example of providing tools that really aid the sales process, but you still have that one-to-one human-led experience. The second example is very, very impressive. I was really excited when I saw this one. Brands like H&M are experimenting and innovating with use of RFID and other technology to allow the sales associate to immediately pinpoint the exact location of an item in the store. So if you think about in large stores in the apparel space, it's not uncommon for items to be in change rooms, placed down in a different spot. And so this is designed to ensure the customer doesn't leave empty-handed. This is live in their Soho store today in New York as a pilot and is a real game changer for the brand and sales associates. Brands like Guess are democratizing data, not demonstrating data, democratizing data, allowing local stores to play a key role in driving footfall. For a launch of a new jean range in Miami, the Guess Miami store was empowered to run their own one-to-one marketing campaigns, inviting their best customers to the launch event because they know who their best customers are. It is a simple example, but again, it's often something that we don't necessarily see locally, the store being empowered to drive one-to-one communications. It's often that this is centralized through support centers. So I thought it's a really great example, again, of empowering the sales associate to drive store outcomes. And then there was some other tech innovation that I also witnessed, the real-time monitoring of on-shelf inventory through cameras, which then alerts sales associates when an item is out of stock. This is being deployed within retailers like Home Depot, across some of their stores and range. And when an item is out of stock, what is then occurring is a team member is then sent a task and notified to go and restock that item in real time. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of the first takeout around human-led, powered by digital. The second trend takeaway is around Gen AI and AI more broadly. And really, we all know what this trend is all about, so don't worry, I'm not going to give you a bit of a one-on-one of what that is. The key takeout here is really that the vast majority of US retail brands are still very much in the experimentation phase of deploying Gen AI. But the sentiment is really that this year is going to be the big year where we go from experimentation to scaling. So who is leading and who is really experimenting and how? Let me give you a little bit of a flavour in terms of what that looks like. Amazon is, of course, leading the pack with their use of Gen AI and is far more mature than most. Amazon is now deploying it in a number of parts to deliver experience, including rewriting product titles on the fly to be more helpful to customers based on what the customer is searching for. So this is a really significant trend. Search is becoming far more conversational on platforms like Amazon with the introduction of Rufus, and therefore how people search and the information they are seeking out is changing. We expect that many retailers will follow this over time, which has significant implications for consumer brands as it changes, as it impacts how we need to manage and optimize content for conversational AI search experiences. So there's a lot in that, and Amazon is leading the pack in terms of how they're using Gen AI to deliver a more customized experience. The second thing they're using it for is to leverage it to power customer service interactions. So their CEO shared that half of all their customer service responses are now touched by AI, and overall satisfaction from these are actually higher than those that aren't supported from AI. So we expect that will continue to increase in the way that they're serving their customers. Gen AI is also being deployed to help sellers to create their listings. And Amazon is also innovating to leverage Gen AI to build helpful new services like tools to provide recommendations for clothing based on one's personal size and fit requirements. And they're doing that through standardizing retailer sizing data, leveraging Gen AI. So why does all this matter for us in Australia? That's a lot about Amazon. Why should we care? The reality is that in Australia today, 10% of all online sales in Australia are now going via the Amazon platform, and this is likely to continue to accelerate based on their plans. Greater customer adoption impacts customer expectations. For retailers and consumer brands, it's really important to understand how those customer expectations are changing and what we need to do to adapt our strategy. Then we have the brands that are experimenting. Brands like Guess are using it to create greater insights, democratization, using it to enable their teams to ask the data questions directly through conversational interfaces to derive insights, to inform decision-making strategy, et cetera, et cetera. And brands like Guess, brands like Tapestry, which own Kate Spade and Coach, were probably one of the more bullish brands in the space from a Gen AI point of view. They're already leveraging it to reduce the time to develop and deliver digital products and experiences, with the brand citing a 40% reduction in code development amongst other use cases. And then you have brands like H&M, which openly suggested that they're still trying to figure this space out. They haven't really seen any breakout innovation that is delivering demonstrable business return for them, but they are not shying away from Gen AI. They are going to keep continuing to experiment. So as you can see, there's lots of activity level, brands at various stages of maturity, but the consensus was very much that this year is going to move from experimentation to really scaling Gen AI within their organizations. And that means if you're a retailer that's not thinking enough about this space, you really do need to start doubling down on plans and activities in this space to improve customer experience. The third key trend takeaway is that we're really starting to see, through the use of technology, the concept of blended experiences become a reality, with digital screens really playing a pivotal role in store to enable retailers to deliver blended experiences. And there's a host of digital screen innovation in the space. For example, I witnessed Lift and Learn technology. So Lift and Learn technology is a digital screen, and it enables a customer to pick up a physical product. And as the customer picks up that product, the screen next to them changes and serves up product information as well as other lifestyle imagery to better engage the shopper. Digital shelf talkers and digital shelf displays are examples of other screen technology, which is bringing a more immersive experience to life on shelf and really adding a touch of theatre and interest in store. So on the left-hand side of this slide, you can see an example of Home Depot deploying digital shelf displays within their white goods department for Samsung. And that display rotates several times, displaying key features and benefits about the product without the need for the customer to pull out their phone to find out more about that product. Digital screens are also being managed or utilised to manage pricing and ticketing, as well as to provide live product information like reviews to aid customer decision making. And again, I saw a lot of that in practice within retailers like Home Depot. And then in addition, digital screens are also being deployed to aid the shopping experience and remove friction and pain points in very practical ways, which enhance the experience. So let me give you an example. Brands like Dick's Sporting Goods are leveraging digital screens in store to make it really simple and easy for customers to check their size of shoe and whether that is in stock without the need to request assistance from a sales associate. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, there's nothing really that's cutting edge here, but the best bit is that if I find the shoe in my size, I can then immediately request that the team member goes and sources that shoe for me without having to speak to anyone. There is obviously nothing worse than trying to buy new shoes and you have to wait around to find somebody to check your size and if it's available. So it's a very, very simple but effective way for brands like Dick's to be able to use digital screens to augment that in-store experience. But if we take it a step further, I also observed several examples of screen technology powered by conversational AI agents to offer digital team member in-store experiences, allowing consumers to engage directly in a conversation with a personified machine. So it's like talking to a sales associate in store, and that conversational interface can provide recommendations based on an individual's needs. All of these examples really do demonstrate the increasing prevalence of digital screens to deliver immersive blended experiences and presents a really big opportunity for FMCG and CPG brands to start to think about how this innovation could support in-store storytelling beyond simply advertising through digital screens themselves. The fourth key trend takeaway is that social commerce growth is set to accelerate as a result of what we are terming the flywheel effect, and that is fueling adoption of social commerce by consumers. So in markets like China, social commerce now represents a third of all e-commerce sales. It is huge and represents over $1 trillion a year spent through social commerce a year. But in other developed markets like the US, it still reflects a much smaller portion of e-commerce sales, currently about 6.6% in the US market. But again, that is anticipated to grow demonstrably. So what is really going to drive this next wave of growth in social commerce? And this was talked about a lot at NRF. It's really these three elements of the flywheel. The first is social search. Nearly 1 in 4 US consumers primarily use social media for search now, and Gen Zs are 25% less to be using 25% less likely to be using Google for search. So that migration for search is on from search engines through to social media. The second is really twofold. The growth in content creator programs is also creating this flywheel effect. Now, what I mean by content creator programs, these are essentially affiliate programs that are designed for creators that enable the creator to market products and monetize their audiences. Walmart, Amazon, TikTok now all have these programs in place to remunerate content creators for product sales. And we're also seeing local retailers adopt similar programs, with the likes of Woolworths entering the market in recent years. So this really creates a new way for the right products to reach the most relevant audiences, fueling that growth in social commerce sales. And then finally, content. More immersive shopping experiences like live streaming and others create new forms of entertainment and create new ways for consumers to get up closer to the product in real life through things like live streams. And that, again, is creating that flywheel effect for social commerce growth. So to quote the head of marketing, Linda Lee from H&M at NRF, she believes, and I completely agree, that brands cannot maintain relevance in market with both Gen Z and millennials if you do not play in the social commerce space. It is that simple. On to the last two. These are a little bit shorter. So I'm going to talk a little bit about retail media. It was another very, very big theme at NRF, unsurprisingly, given its growth. And obviously, it's showing no sign of slowing down anytime soon. But to give you a bit of context of the US market first, 77% of all retail media spend is spent on the Amazon platform. And the next biggest player is Walmart, and they have 7% share. So yes, Amazon is a very big monopoly in the retail media market in the US. And remember, I highlighted before that Amazon is growing locally. And so as their sales grow, so too will their share of retail media spend in the local market. So with that being said, I want to cover two big outtakes on the retail media front. The first is that off-network retail media spend surpassed on-site retail media spend for the first time in 2024. And from now until 2028, off-network retail media spend will grow 3 times the rate of on-site retail media spend, which means brands are going to be investing more heavily in social, programmatic, streaming ads, and other mediums through retail media networks. As retail media networks continue to build their off-network inventory and partner with publishers in different ways, this creates greater opportunity for brands to activate off-network to drive discoverability and consideration, really driving that top of funnel activity, and enabling retail media networks to deliver full funnel experiences. And the second big outtake is really around measurement. US networks like Roundel and others are really starting to move away from ROAS as the core metric to measure retail media success. Whilst it should still play a role, greater emphasis and focus is really being placed on measurement of sales attribution, really providing that closed loop measurement across the network, incrementality measurement to isolate uplift, which includes leveraging techniques like market mix modeling and other tools to measure that uplift, as well as starting to bolster measurement frameworks to look at metrics that help to consumer brands to determine what is the longer term effect on our share as a result of our investment in retail media. So whilst in Australia, retail media network measurement is still maturing, it's important that consumer brands give thought to how your measurement approach goes beyond campaign-based metrics like ROAS, because they do have quite significant limitations, to ensure your investment is enabling you to acquire new customers to brand and support your ability to grow share over time versus simply delivering a sales result today. And then finally, the last theme I will touch on is the increasing interest in leveraging ambient intelligence. So the VP of Omni at Tapestry, who owns Coach and Kate Spade, as I mentioned before, and a suite of other brands, she put it best. We know far more about our customer behaviours online than we do our customer behaviours in store. And many leading retail brands are now becoming increasingly focused on how do we close that knowledge gap. And that's really what ambient intelligence supports. It's delivered through a suite of tools and technology like RFD and sensors to be able to collect the data and enable retail brands to monitor the in-store environment, to measure things like how inventory is interacted with, where dwell time is strongest in the store environment, stock out rates, overall footfall, and more. And whilst ambient intelligence is not new, in fact, I was talking about it way back when in 2013 when I was at Coles, it's now really gaining greater interest in part due to the growth of retail media and the need to effectively report on performance to advertisers by retailers. In addition, however, retailers have learnt about the power of online intelligence and how it informs key decision making. And so they now increasingly want that intelligence to help inform things like in-store merchandising layouts and more. And the CEO of Sephora, she did a really interesting talk at NRF, and she was talking about how Sephora is about to roll out a new store format across their entire network and how they've leveraged intelligence to make those decisions in terms of where people are spending time within the store. But equally, the way that they are building their new store formats is really interesting. They're creating it to be quite modular in order to be able to adapt and change that layout quickly on the basis of in-store intelligence. And so I think that's a really great example of how brands are thinking about not only intelligence itself, but then how do we react to that intelligence in this in-store environment in a rapid manner. Brands like H&M are also a really great example of brands that are really doubling down on ambient intelligence to extract more value from the store and really help shape that store experience and store environment moving forward. So there's the 6 trend takeaways. That kind of concludes the briefing part of this session. If you have not dropped any questions in the chat and you have a burning question, please do add that to the chat now. I am going to hand back over to Kat to facilitate the Q&A session. Over to you, Kat.
Thanks, Teresa. Certainly lots of valuable insights there to take away for consumers and retailers. So as Teresa mentioned, if you haven't already, please pop your questions into the box. But I just have a little question just to start off there, Teresa. So what actually surprised you the most or resonated with you the most from everything that you saw and heard in the States?
It was quite overwhelming, actually. It was quite difficult to, at times work out what am I taking out of this? But I think there's probably a couple of things that really did resonate with me and things that surprised me. So the first is really that the industry is moving so quickly, but at the same time, it's not. And so when I was at NRF, I witnessed floors and floors and floors of amazing technology. Think about the Melbourne Convention Centre times three. That's how much technology was showcased at NRF. And retailers are deploying it, but they might be doing it as a pilot. And so it's not necessarily scaled through their entire network. So they're not kind of deriving that full benefit and uplift in experience. And it also means that only a portion of their customers are benefiting from the deployment of that technology within the stores. So, and I think one of the drawbacks for the innovation in tech is that it is very costly to execute that across your entire network. So, Home Depot is a really great example as well. They have digital ticketing in their stores, and they have that on shelf. And that's including not just the price, but the review of the product and some other product information. But they're only using it in parts of the store, because to use digital ticketing across the entire store, again, is simply too costly for them to execute. So I thought that was really, really interesting. The second is that digital literacy of senior executives in the US is much more mature than it is in Australia. And that's no disrespect to any executive in Australia, but it just struck me how digitally literate CEOs and executives over there are. The CEO from New Balance understood the correlation between growth in brand search on Google and growth in sales. The Amazon CEO is having weekly meetings and showcases with his team around Gen AI. And the Sephora CEO, she actually started in digital. And what that means is, it doesn't mean that they're leading their businesses digital first. What it means is that digital is more deeply embedded and a core part of the organization's strategy.
Yeah. So sounds like we've got a lot to learn from the US there then.
Absolutely. We definitely do.
I've just got two questions that have come up here. So I'll
Sure.
start with the question from Felicia. So
Sure.
ambient intelligence is interesting, but seems like it could put off customers who don't want to feel watched and maybe blurry legally. Didn't Bunnings and 7-Eleven try versions of this? So how do you think that this could play out in Australia?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting and good question. And it was something that was talked about at NRF. I think that any brand thinking about deploying ambient intelligence does need to give consideration to what does that mean from a privacy point of view, and how do we make customers aware that we are doing it, and how do we do it in a way that doesn't feel like it is creepy and we are being watched. And it's that really fine line between it helps and aids the customer experience, but equally, I personally don't want that data collected on me individually. So I think that it's an area where brands will increasingly push into, but they have to balance that piece around, well, what does that mean from a privacy perspective, and how we're balancing the needs of intelligence, the customer, and really delivering that great experience. And I don't think brands have an answer to that yet. I think that it was something that H&M was talking quite a lot about. How do we balance that? And that is top priority for us as a retailer. But I don't think they've got that sorted out either.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it would be an art to be able to get the balance right between all of those elements. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I've just got one more question here for you as well from
Sure.
Jill. So she said, thank you. This is all great info. What trends did you see in retail media for in-store digital screens / experience?
It's a really interesting one. So, as I said, I went to 12 retailers, and I actually purposefully didn't just go to the ones in New York, in Soho, because usually that's where all the piloting is happening. I went to stores in Miami, and I went to stores in other states. And what I found, which surprised me the most, was probably the inconsistency and deployment of digital screens in some of those retail stores for the purposes of retail media. And so I'd take Dick's Sporting Goods as a really good example. They talk about their retail media offering and the deployment of, digital screens and brand activation across their entire network. But I went into their biggest store in Miami, which was a very big store. I did not find a digital screen in sight. And I think despite all of the discussion of digital screens and leveraging digital screens for retail media, I was quite surprised how little I saw of them within some of the retailers I went to, and that was across the board. And so I think I saw more use of digital screens again for experience delivery than simply for the purposes of executing retail media and providing advertising solutions, which really, really did surprise me. So
Yeah.
that probably didn't quite answer Jill's question, but I think, what's interesting is it's that prevalence issue. When brands are talking about scaling across their whole network, are they actually delivering consumer brands their whole network? And maybe in some respects, the retail media executions are better tied to brand stories in some respects than pure advertising, which is why I may not have noticed it as much for pure retail media activation.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Hopefully that answered your question, Jill. And
she'll tell me if it doesn't.
Yes, she will. And one more question here as well from Anthony. So with Amazon taking market share from the likes of Walmart, any insights to how the likes of Walmart can defend or pivot?
It's a really interesting one because I think Walmart's competitive advantage is their footprint, right? Their local footprint. Amazon obviously is a pure play retailer, and Amazon has outlets all over the country. And I would say Walmart is a formidable competitor to Amazon. They are one of the retailers that I would say really do understand where the market's going and how it's changing. I would say from a retail media point of view, they're probably not getting their fair share of retail media spend, but overall they have pivoted quite a lot. They've invested heavily in their marketplace strategy. They've invested heavily in evolution of offering. And so I don't necessarily think that they need a fundamental pivot of strategy. It's more for them, I think, how are they going to win the retail media dollars? What is also interesting, though, and connected to this is that I spent a lot of time talking to some other industry experts over there about retail media, and they were telling me that there is about 62 competitors in the retail media market in the US. And if you are not 1, 2, or maybe 3 and 4, you're kind of vying for a couple of % share of retail media. And I think there's some really good learnings in that for retail media players in Australia because the market will only sustain so many networks, and the biggest ones will capture the lion's share, right? So for smaller brands, how do we consolidate and partner and work to build something of strength rather than try to go it alone? And I think that's a really powerful message given what we see in terms of the skew of market share in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've just had 2 more questions drop in as well. So
it's good. Oh, it's busy. I like it.
I know, yeah. Yeah, and then we can wrap up.
Right.
So another question from Jill. What helps content rank well in social search compared to search engines like Google?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. So I think that what you first have to understand is that from a social search point of view, the interfaces are very different. So TikTok is very, very different to search, and credibility comes in part from the creator, right? So thinking about how you work effectively with creators is key. I think one of the challenges we also have locally in Australia is that TikTok Shops is not here yet. And so that TikTok, driving to TikTok to shop is a more embedded behavior in the US than it currently is within Australia. And so I think what will happen as TikTok starts to launch in other markets, which I anticipate they will, and I anticipate at some point they will launch in Australia, that behavior will change because people will know I can go and shop there, which will then start to influence how we need to effectively optimize in order to surface product recommendations and all of those types of things within the TikTok shop interface. So today I think it's really about ensuring that you're driving visibility of product through effective partnering with creators. and really understanding how are people searching on these platforms, because the way they are searching is a little bit different. Right. And there are some great tools out there to determine how people are searching. Tools like Exploding Trends and others really do help you to start to get a sense of what is happening in that social search space in order to effectively optimize the content accordingly. So hopefully that's helpful, and a bit of a kind of, additional insight there around TikTok shops and how that will also further change what's happening locally.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just to further add to that as well, you can't really think of search and social search as kind of two mutually exclusive things, because certain Google searches that you'll put in, it will bring up TikTok videos right at the top. So rather than thinking, you've got your social strategy and your search strategy, it's about how you can combine those things together, and the search terms that people are using on social compared to.
I think that's an amazing add to what I've just said. And it's funny, the other day I was doing a whole lot of searching for videos for a training program we're rolling out very shortly. And it was dominated by TikTok videos, right? I couldn't actually even see a YouTube video come up. So again, I think what you're saying is absolutely bang on, Kat. Not thinking about them as separate strategies, because the two do blend in various ways is also important. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I think is the last question, which is again from Felicia, a follow up on the last one. The Amazon growth in Australia is really relevant, re the retail network and other trends. Do you have a view of which Australian customers are the ones converting across first to being Amazon shoppers?
Yeah. Did you say really relevant or irrelevant?
Really relevant.
Really relevant.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because trying to get, data on categories, etc., from Amazon can be a little bit challenging. In Australia, obviously the difference is Amazon doesn't have a perishable offering in Australia, so it's non-perishable. If we look at categories like baby, pet, toilet paper, those type of replenishment-based items, there's been a lot of shift in that space across to Amazon, alongside of categories like electronics, books, etc., etc. Those that you would expect them to be strong players within. In part driven by their Amazon save and subscribe offering. So that the challenge around value and customers looking around for greater value has really driven the shift across for some of those categories, which is why we're seeing those migration of audiences. And then equally, the adoption of same-day delivery across the, certain parts of the East Coast have also driven that adoption for a number of those categories as well. I need it now and I can get it next day. So hopefully, Felicia, that answers your question, gives you a bit of a sense for some of the categories where we're seeing a shift in customer to certain kind of grocery categories, as well as those more traditional categories. The other thing I will say, there's certain categories that are watch and see. Vitamins is a really big category for Amazon in the US. It's not locally today, but is growing. Health and wellness is growing. So again, I think it's one of those spaces you have to keep a really, really close eye on, because it's changing rapidly. And I do think some retailers underestimate just how much of that shift is already occurring.
Thank you. Well, that sums
Fantastic.
up all of the questions that we've got. So thank you so much for answering those.
No problem. Thank you everyone for attending the webinar today. Again, if you do want to touch base, learn anything more about us, or you have any questions, please feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn, to reach out personally to me. And thank you for attending. We really appreciate you coming along.
Thank you.